The needle pierced through my fingertip for the third time that morning, and I watched the blood bead on the silk. Royal blue silk worth more than my entire shop. My hands trembled as I heard the carriage wheels stop outside, the unmistakable sound of the royal guard's boots hitting cobblestone. Through the frost-covered window of my tiny tailor shop, I could see the golden crest that I'd only dreamed of in my previous life. The queen herself had come. I pressed my bleeding finger to my lips, tasting copper, and remembering another time I'd tasted blood, my own blood, pooling in my mouth as I lay dying on cold marble floors. My sister Celestine's wedding dress still clutched in my hands. The dress I'd spent 3 months creating in secret, hoping to win back even a fraction of my family's love. The dress she'd destroyed in front of me before pushing me down the stairs. But that was before. Before I died. Before I woke up 10 years in the past with every memory intact, including the knowledge that in exactly 3 years, the crown prince would choose his bride, and that bride would need a coronation gown unlike anything the kingdom had ever seen. The shop door's bell chimed, and Her Majesty entered, wrapped in dark furs against the winter cold. Her ladies-in-waiting gasped at the modest interior. Just 3 mannequins, a cutting table, and walls lined with carefully organized fabrics. Nothing like the grand ateliers on Fashion Row where my family's shop stood, where Celestine now reigned as the city's most celebrated dressmaker. "You are Evangeline?" the queen asked, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "I am, Your Majesty." I curtsied low, keeping my bleeding finger hidden in the folds of my simple wool dress. "I have heard extraordinary things about your work. They say you can capture moonlight and thread, that your gowns make plain girls beautiful and beautiful girls divine." She moved closer, examining the half-finished gown on my center mannequin. A commission from a merchant's wife. Nothing special except for the way I'd made common cotton look like imported satin through a technique I'd learned in my past life, years after my family had already discarded me. "They also say," the queen continued, her sharp eyes studying my face, "that you are the disgraced daughter of House Moreau, cast out for attempting to sabotage your sister's engagement to Duke Aldrich." The lie still burned, even in this second life. I had never tried to sabotage anything. Celestine had planted her own jewelry in my room, claimed I'd stolen it to sell, said I was jealous of her engagement. Mother had been all too eager to believe her perfect daughter over the disappointment I'd always been in their eyes. Too plain, too quiet, too skilled with needle and thread instead of charm and conversation. "I am no longer of House Moreau," I said carefully. "I am simply a tailor, Your Majesty." "Good." The queen's lips curved in what might have been approval. "I have no interest in House Moreau. I have interest in the girl who created Countess Wellesley's morning gown, the one that made her look like a dark angel at her husband's funeral. The girl who designed Lady Pemberton's wedding dress, that caused 3 proposals at the reception from men who'd never noticed her before. The girl whose work has begun to eclipse even the great Celestine Moreau, despite having no noble connections, no wealthy patrons, and a shop barely large enough to turn around in. She didn't know the truth, that I knew exactly what styles would emerge over the next 10 years, what techniques the greatest designers would eventually discover, what would make women weep with desire. In my first life, I'd learned them all, studying in secret even as my family told me I had no talent, copying Celestine's work to try to understand why hers was always chosen over mine. It wasn't until after she'd killed me that I'd realized the truth. My work had always been better. She'd simply claimed it as her own. "I need a coronation gown," the queen said simply. "My son announces his bride in 6 months. The ceremony will be the grandest this kingdom has seen in a century. Every noble house will be watching. Every thread will be scrutinized. The future queen's gown will be remembered for generations." She paused, letting the weight of this settle. "I have been to every atelier in the city. Celestine Moreau spent 3 hours showing me sketches of gowns dripping with jewels and gold thread. The others offered much the same: opulence without meaning, beauty without soul." My heart raced. In my first life, Celestine had won this commission. The coronation gown had made her a legend, had earned her a title, had given her wealth beyond imagining. It was the pinnacle of her career, the achievement she'd lorded over me until the day I died. "What I need," the queen continued, "is someone who understands that a coronation gown is not just about beauty, It's about transformation. It's about taking a girl, whoever my son chooses, and making her look like she was born to rule. Can you do that? Yes, I said, the word escaping before I could second guess myself. Yes, Your Majesty, I can. The Queen studied me for a long moment. You have 1 week to prepare 3 sample designs. Not sketches, actual samples, small versions I can touch and see. If they please me, you will have the commission. If not, she shrugged elegantly. I suppose I will have to settle for jewels and gold thread. After she left, I sank onto my single chair, staring at the spot where she'd stood. 1 week. In my first life, I'd learned that Celestine had been given a month to prepare her samples, and she'd used my hands to do most of the work, claiming she needed my help for the family's reputation. I'd sewn until my fingers bled, created 3 masterpieces that I'd never gotten credit for. She'd presented them as her own work and won the commission that changed her life. But I knew something now that I hadn't known then. I knew exactly which design the Queen had chosen. More importantly, I knew why she'd chosen it, what had spoken to her about that particular combination of elements, and I knew how to make it even better. The memory of my death was never far from my mind, especially when I worked late into the night, as I did now. The shop was silent except for the whisper of thread through fabric and the occasional pop from the dying fire in the small hearth. My fingers moved with practiced precision, muscle memory from 2 lifetimes guiding every stitch. I had been 25 when I died, crushed at the bottom of the marble staircase in my family's mansion. The physical pain had been overwhelming but brief. The emotional pain, that had been building for 25 years. Father had wanted sons. When Mother gave him 2 daughters instead, he'd focused all his hopes on Celestine, the pretty one, the charming one, the one who could smile and make the world reorganize itself to please her. I was the spare, useful only for the dowry I might bring if anyone could be convinced to marry me. But I'd loved them anyway. Loved them with the desperate fervor of a child who believes that if she's just good enough, helpful enough, perfect enough, she'll finally earn their affection. I learned to sew because Mother said it would make me useful. I learned to embroider because Celestine said it would give me something to do while she entertained suitors. I learned to design because Father said perhaps I could help in the family business, even if I'd never be the face of it. The family business, Moreau's fashion house, the most prestigious atelier in the capital. Built by my grandmother, expanded by my father, and set to be inherited by Celestine. I was allowed to work in the back rooms, cutting patterns and stitching seams while Celestine presented my designs as her own to clients. She'd say she was mentoring me, teaching me, allowing me to assist her out of sisterly kindness. The truth was that by the time I was 18, I was doing all the real work. Celestine would describe what she wanted, always vague, always impossible, and I would make it reality. When clients praised the innovative techniques, the exquisite attention to detail, the way the gowns seemed to understand exactly what would flatter their figures, Celestine would smile and accept the compliments as her due. I'd tried once to claim credit for my work. I'd been 20 and Lady Ashford had commissioned a gown for her daughter's debut. Celestine had been traveling with her new fiancé, Duke Aldrich, and Father had reluctantly allowed me to handle the consultation. I'd designed something revolutionary, a gown that used hidden corsetry to create an impossibly elegant silhouette while remaining comfortable enough to dance in all night. Lady Ashford had been ecstatic. When Celestine returned and saw the design, she'd flown into a rage, but not publicly, never publicly. She'd waited until we were alone, then she'd taken scissors to the gown, destroying hours of work. She'd told our parents that I'd ruined the commission out of jealousy, that I'd tried to sabotage her reputation while she was away. Mother had believed her instantly. Father hadn't even bothered to ask for my side of the story. The punishment had been severe. I was banned from the workshop, forbidden from touching the materials, told that I was lucky they didn't cast me out entirely. Celestine had recreated my design, poorly, and delivered it to Lady Ashford with apologies for the delay, claiming she'd had to fix my mistakes. That had been the beginning of the end. Over the next 5 years, the lies grew bigger, the punishments harsher. Celestine married Duke Aldrich and moved into a mansion even grander than our family home, but she still returned regularly to work at the atelier. Still needed me to create the designs that maintained her reputation. By then, I was working in secret, late at night, leaving my completed work where she could discover it and claim inspiration. I'd thought if I just endured, if I just kept being useful, eventually something would change. Eventually, they'd see my worth. Eventually, I'd earn their love. The day I died, Celestine had been preparing for the Duke's annual ball. She needed a gown that would outshine every other lady in attendance, something that would remind everyone why she was the most celebrated dressmaker in the kingdom. She'd demanded I create something spectacular, and I had. A gown of midnight blue silk that seemed to hold actual starlight in its folds, achieved through a technique I'd developed using crushed pearls and silver thread so fine it was nearly invisible. I'd brought it to her room, proud of what I'd created despite everything. She'd looked at it, looked at me, and said, "It's adequate, I suppose, though I'll need to fix the bodice. You never did understand proper proportions." Something in me had snapped. "I understand proportions perfectly," I'd said, the first words of defiance I'd spoken in years. "I understand them better than you ever have, just like I understand design and color and construction. You've been stealing my work for 7 years, Celestine. We both know it." The slap had been expected. What hadn't been expected was the push that followed it, sending me tumbling backward down the curved marble staircase. My head had struck the bottom step with a crack that echoed through the foyer. The last thing I'd seen was Celestine at the top of the stairs, holding my gown, her face completely calm. "She fell," I'd heard her tell the servants who came running. "Poor Evangeline, always so clumsy. Someone clean this up." Then darkness, then impossibly light again. I'd awakened in my childhood bed, 15 years old again, with every memory of the next 10 years intact. At first, I'd thought it was a dream, a dying hallucination. But the days had passed, and I'd remained 15, watching events unfold exactly as I remembered them. Celestine's first commission at 16, father expanding the workshop when I was 17, mother's brief illness that winter, which I now knew to prepare medicine for in advance. The second time around, I'd tried to change things within the family first. I'd worked harder, been more charming, tried to win their affection before Celestine could poison them against me. But some patterns were too deep to break. Father still saw me as a disappointment. Mother still favored Celestine. And Celestine? She still hated me with a venom I now understood had nothing to do with anything I'd done and everything to do with her knowledge that without my skills, she was merely ordinary. So at 18, instead of accepting their abuse, I'd left. I'd taken the small inheritance my grandmother had left me, the one they didn't know I knew about, and I'd opened my own shop in the poorest district of the city. A tiny space with barely enough room for my supplies, but it was mine. The early days had been brutal. No one wanted to commission work from a nobody in the slums. I'd survived by mending clothes for coppers, slowly building a reputation for being able to fix anything, make anything look better than it had before. Then Lady Pemberton's maid had come, desperate. Her mistress's gown for the harvest ball had been ruined by another maid's clumsiness, and every atelier in the city was too busy to help. Could I possibly recreate it in 3 days? I could, and I did, but better than the original. Lady Pemberton had been so impressed she'd commissioned a wedding gown. That gown had caused a sensation. Within 6 months, I had a waiting list. Meanwhile, I watched from afar as events unfolded exactly as I remembered. Celestine became engaged to Duke Aldrich. She took over more responsibility at the family atelier. Her reputation grew, built on designs she created after visiting my old workspace at night, not knowing I'd left detailed sketches specifically for her to find. Good, but not my best. Never my best. Those I saved for my own clients. The Queen's deadline loomed. 1 week to create 3 samples that would determine not just my future, but the entire trajectory of both our lives. In my first life, the 3 designs Celestine had presented were, first, the Dawn's Promise, a gown of palest pink that shifted to gold, representing the dawn of a new reign. It had been beautiful but conventional. Second, the Kingdom's Heart, deep red silk with ruby embellishments, symbolizing the lifeblood of the nation. Opulent and dramatic, but ultimately forgettable. Third, the Sovereign Star, white silk with silver and diamond details, pure and regal. This was the one the Queen had chosen, though I'd never understood why until years later when I'd learned the Queen's own coronation gown had been white. and she'd wanted to honor that tradition while making it fresh. But I knew now what Celestine hadn't known then. The queen hadn't really loved any of them. She'd chosen the least offensive option. What she'd wanted, what she'd never said aloud, was something that told a story. The queen was a romantic at heart, though she hid it well. She wanted the coronation gown to be a fairy tale made real. So I would give her 3 fairy tales, but with teeth. The first sample I created was The Phoenix Rises, a gown that appeared to be made of ashes at the hem, gray and textured like burned silk. But as the eye traveled upward, it transformed. The gray became shot through with gold, then orange, then brilliant red, until at the bodice it was pure flame-colored silk that seemed to move with its own light. The message was clear. From destruction comes rebirth. From ashes comes glory. It was my story, but it would be the new queen's story too. Rising from whatever common or noble house she came from to become royalty. The second was The Winter Rose, inspired by an old fairy tale the queen had loved as a child, which I only knew because I'd overheard her discussing it with her ladies during a fitting in my past life. The gown was ice blue silk so pale it was almost white, with embroidery that looked like frost patterns. But hidden within the frost were tiny roses, worked in thread that had been treated with a solution I'd perfected. They were invisible until they caught the light just right. Then, they bloomed in brilliant red. It was about finding beauty in the coldest moments, about secrets revealing themselves only to those who looked closely. The third was my masterpiece, the one I knew would win, The Constellation Crown. It began as deepest midnight blue at the train, the silk so dark it seemed to swallow light. But worked throughout were tiny stars, not embroidered but actually woven into the fabric using a technique I'd invented that incorporated thin silver wire. As the gown moved, the stars would shimmer and new constellations would appear. The bodice was where the magic happened. The stars grew denser, brighter, until they formed a crown constellation at the neckline. The future queen wouldn't need a tiara, she'd be wearing the night sky itself. Each sample took 2 days of nearly continuous work. I barely slept, barely ate, existing on will and the knowledge of what was at stake. My fingers bled onto the fabric and I wiped it away, incorporated it into the design, made my pain part of the beauty. On the 5th day, as I was finishing the constellation gown, Celestine arrived at my shop. She looked exactly as she had in my memories. Perfectly coiffed, expensively dressed, beautiful in the cold way of a marble statue. She stood in my doorway like she owned it, though I could see her nose wrinkle at the modest surroundings. "Sister," she said, the word dripping with false sweetness, "I heard the most extraordinary rumor. They say the queen herself visited this establishment." I kept my eyes on my work, my hands steady despite the rage building in my chest. "Your sources are well informed. You can't seriously think you have a chance at the commission." She moved closer, her expensive perfume filling the small space. "You're nobody, Evangeline. A runaway playing at being a real dressmaker. The queen was probably just curious about the scandal. The disgraced Moreau daughter trying to compete with her betters." In my first life, words like these would have crushed me. Now they were just noise. "If you're so certain I have no chance, why are you here?" Her composure cracked slightly. "I'm here to offer you an opportunity. Come back to the family atelier. Work for me, officially this time. I'll pay you well, give you credit as an assistant. It's more than you deserve after the embarrassment you've caused us, but I'm willing to be generous." I finally looked up at her, really looked at her. She was scared. For the first time in both my lives, Celestine was scared of me. "No," I said simply, returning to my work. "No? You'd rather live in squalor than accept my generous offer?" "I'd rather die than work for you again." The words came out calm, matter of fact. "Which, coincidentally, is exactly what happened the last time I worked for you." She went very still. "What did you say?" "Nothing of importance." I held up the constellation bodice, examining it in the lamplight. "You should go, Celestine. You have your own samples to prepare, don't you? Though I suppose without me to do the actual work, you'll have to manage on your own. Must be terrifying." Her face flushed red. "You ungrateful little—" She reached for the gown, clearly intending to destroy it as she'd destroyed so many of my creations before. But I'd been expecting this. I pulled the gown away and stood, meeting her eyes directly. Touch my work and I'll scream. The whole street will come running. How will you explain why the great Celestine Moreau is in her disgraced sister's shop, trying to destroy her merchandise? What will the queen think when she hears about it? You wouldn't dare. I have nothing to lose. You, on the other hand, have everything to lose. I smiled, the first genuine smile I'd given her in either lifetime. Leave, Celestine, and don't come back. She left, but not before delivering a parting shot. When you fail, and you will fail, don't come crawling back to us. You're dead to this family. If only she knew how literal that statement had once been. The day I presented my samples to the queen, the entire court knew about it. Word had spread that the disgraced Moreau daughter and the celebrated Celestine were both competing for the commission, along with 3 other established dressmakers. It had become the scandal of the season. The queen had arranged for all 5 competitors to present their samples on the same day in the throne room before the entire court. It was theater, spectacle, a reminder that the royal family knew how to put on a show. It was also terrifying. I arrived in my best dress. Simple black wool that I'd tailored to perfection, with tiny silver details at the cuffs that echoed the constellation gown. I carried my samples in a specially made case, each one wrapped in protective silk. Celestine was already there, resplendent in a gown of her own creation that probably cost more than my shop's rent for a year. She was surrounded by admirers, laughing at something Duke Aldrich had said. When she saw me, her smile sharpened. The other 3 competitors were established dressmakers, all talented, all worthy. In my first life, they'd been eliminated in favor of Celestine's designs. I wondered if this time would be different. The queen entered with full ceremony, the crown prince at her side. Prince Adrian was 23, handsome in a scholarly way, with thoughtful eyes and his mother's sharp intelligence. In my first life, he'd married Lady Serena Blackwood, a choice that had surprised everyone. She'd been neither the most beautiful nor the most politically advantageous match, but she'd been brilliant, kind, and had made him laugh. I wondered if that would change too. "We begin," the queen announced, "with House Aldrich." Celestine stepped forward, her assistants unveiling her samples with practiced flair. They were exactly as I remembered. Beautiful, expensive, technically proficient. But now, seeing them with experienced eyes, I could see what I'd missed before. They were soulless, perfect constructions without heart. The queen examined each one, her face revealing nothing. "Exquisite craftsmanship," she said neutrally. "Next." The other 3 competitors presented their work. All of it was beautiful. All of it was forgettable. Then it was my turn. I unveiled the phoenix first, holding it up so the light could catch the gradation from ash to flame. There were gasps from the crowd. The queen leaned forward slightly. "The story of transformation," I said simply. "Every queen must rise from who she was to who she must become." The winter rose came next, and I held it at just the angle where the hidden roses would bloom in the light. More gasps, and I saw the queen's lips part slightly in surprise. "The story of hidden strength," I explained. "What seems delicate and cold may hide unexpected beauty." Finally, the constellation crown. As I lifted it, I gave it a gentle shake so the stars would shimmer, creating the illusion of a living night sky. The throne room fell completely silent. "The story of destiny," I said. "Some are born to wear crowns of gold, others wear crowns of stars." The queen rose from her throne, something she hadn't done for any other presentation. She walked down the steps, approaching me directly. She touched the constellation gown with reverent fingers, finding the silver wire, understanding the complexity of what I'd achieved. "How?" she asked quietly for my ears alone. "How did you know?" I could have pretended not to understand, but something in her eyes stopped me. "I know what it's like to be overlooked, Your Majesty, to have others claim your light. I thought the future queen might appreciate a gown that makes its own light, that doesn't need anyone else's approval to shine." She looked at me for a long moment, and I saw recognition in her eyes. Not of my rebirth, that secret would die with me, but of a kindred spirit. The queen had been a minor noble before her marriage, chosen by the previous king for love rather than politics. She knew what it was to be underestimated. "The commission is yours," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. All 3 designs will be made. The future queen will choose which one to wear on her coronation day. The throne room erupted. Celestine's face went white, then red, then purple. Duke Aldrich had to physically hold her back as she started toward me. "This is impossible!" she shrieked. "She's nobody. She's a thief and a liar. She was cast out of our family for good reason." "Silence," the queen commanded, and the room froze. "Lady Aldrich, you will explain yourself." Celestine, realizing her mistake, tried to recover. "I only mean that my sister—" "Your sister?" The queen's eyebrows rose. "The sister you told everyone had no talent? The sister whose work you claimed was inferior? That sister just created 3 samples that surpass anything you've ever shown me. Either you lied then, or you're lying now. Which is it?" Celestine's mouth opened and closed like a fish, gasping for air. Around her, the admirers stepped back, suddenly finding elsewhere to be. "Your Majesty," I said, surprising myself by speaking. "My sister speaks from disappointment. We all say things we don't mean when we're upset. I bear her no ill will." It was a calculated mercy, one that would haunt Celestine more than any revenge. To be saved by the sister she'd tormented, in front of everyone who mattered, there was no greater humiliation. The queen smiled, understanding exactly what I was doing. How gracious! We could all learn from such forgiveness. She turned back to address the room. "The commission is decided. Miss Evangeline Moreau." She paused. "I apologize. What name do you go by now?" "Just Evangeline, Your Majesty. I am my own house now." "The commission is awarded to Evangeline. Court is dismissed." As the nobles filed out, gossiping furiously, Prince Adrian approached me. I curtsied low, but he gestured for me to rise. "The constellation gown," he said quietly. "It reminds me of a story my mother used to tell me, about a seamstress who wove starlight into thread. I thought it was just a fairy tale." "All fairy tales have a grain of truth, Your Highness." He smiled, and it transformed his serious face. "I think Lady Serena would love that gown. She's always saying she feels overwhelmed by the thought of being queen, like she'll never be enough." Lady Serena, so that hadn't changed. "Then perhaps," I said carefully, "the gown will remind her that she already carries her own crown, made of qualities far more valuable than gold." "I hope you're right." He paused. "My mother made an excellent choice." After he left, I stood alone in the throne room for a moment, absorbing what had just happened. In my first life, this moment had belonged to Celestine. It had been the pinnacle of her career, the achievement that had defined her legacy. Now it was mine, but it didn't feel like theft. It felt like reclamation. The next 3 months were the most intense of either of my lives. Creating 3 full coronation gowns, each more complex than anything I'd attempted before, would have been challenging enough. But word of my triumph had spread, and suddenly everyone wanted a gown by Evangeline. I had to hire assistants, real ones, not the facade Celestine had maintained. I found them in unexpected places. A widow who'd done invisible mending for 40 years and had fingers more skilled than any academy-trained seamstress. A young man who'd been dismissed from another atelier for suggesting improvements to established techniques. A foreign girl who knew dyeing methods that could achieve colors I'd only dreamed of. We moved to a larger shop in a better district. Not Fashion Row, that was still Celestine's domain, but a respectable area where merchants and minor nobles lived. The shop had proper windows, multiple fitting rooms, and a workshop large enough for all of us to work without elbowing each other. I should have been happy. I was successful, independent, creating beautiful things that were truly mine. But the past haunted me in ways I hadn't expected. Sometimes I'd catch myself looking at my hands, remembering how they'd looked covered in blood at the bottom of those stairs. Sometimes I'd see Celestine's carriage pass by and have to resist the urge to run, as if she could somehow still push me downstairs that weren't there. And sometimes, late at night when I was alone with my needle and thread, I'd wonder if I was any better than her now. I'd taken the life she was meant to have, used knowledge that wasn't quite fairly gained. Was rebirth justice or just another form of theft? Lady Serena came for her first fitting on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. She arrived without fanfare, accompanied only by a single guard and her lady's maid. She was exactly as I remembered her, tall and thin, with intelligent brown eyes, and hair that never quite stayed in its pins. Not conventionally beautiful, but there was something about her that drew the eye, a warmth that made you want to know her better. I'm terrified, she said as soon as the door closed, before I could even curtsy. I'm sorry, that's probably not what you want to hear, but I thought you should know. I'm absolutely terrified of all of this. I set down my measuring tape, really looking at her. Of the wedding or of being queen? Both, all of it. I'm the third daughter of a minor baron. I studied astronomy and mathematics while other girls were learning to host tea parties. I can calculate the trajectory of a comet, but I can't remember which fork to use for fish. And now I'm supposed to become queen? She sank into a chair very ungracefully. Adrian says he loves me, and I believe him, but love doesn't make me qualified to wear a crown. I thought about my answer carefully. In my first life, I'd never interacted with Lady Serena beyond seeing her at court events. Now, I had the chance to offer something more than just a gown. Your Majesty. Please, just Serena, I'm not Your Majesty yet. I might never be if I trip walking down the aisle and brain myself on a pew. I laughed, surprising both of us. Serena, then. Can I tell you something? The queen, the current queen, she came from a minor noble house too. She was chosen for love, not politics. Everyone said she'd fail, that she was too young, too inexperienced, too common. But she's magnificent. She makes it look effortless. She makes it look effortless now. But I've heard stories from the older courtiers. She used to hide in the gardens to cry. She once used the wrong seal on a diplomatic letter and nearly caused an international incident. She learned slowly, painfully, but she learned. Serena looked up at me, hope flickering in her eyes. Really? Really. And you have something she didn't have. A prince who chose you for exactly who you are, not who he hopes you'll become. He doesn't want a perfect queen. He wants you, the woman who calculates comet trajectories for fun. How do you know that? I thought of Prince Adrian's face when he'd spoken of her, the soft wonder in his eyes. Because he told me you would love the constellation gown. A man who knows you love stars enough to want to wear them is a man who sees you clearly. She stood, moving to where the 3 gowns hung in their protective covers. May I see them? I unveiled them one by one, explaining the symbolism of each, the technical challenges, the way they would move and catch light. She listened intently, asking questions about construction and materials that showed her mathematical mind at work. When she saw the constellation gown, she gasped and reached out, then pulled her hand back. I'll ruin it. You won't. Touch it. It's stronger than it looks. She ran her fingers over the fabric, finding the silver wires, watching the stars shimmer. It's like wearing the night sky. That's the idea. You love the stars. Why shouldn't you wear them? Celestine Moreau says wearing dark colors to a coronation is bad luck. I kept my voice neutral despite the spike of anger. Celestine Moreau says many things. How many of them have proven true? Serena gave me a sharp look. She's your sister, isn't she? I heard many versions of the story. She is my sister by blood, nothing more. She's been telling everyone who will listen that you stole her techniques, that these designs are actually hers that you copied. Of course she was. In this life, as in the last, Celestine couldn't bear to lose. And what do you think? Serena was quiet for a moment, studying the gowns with her analytical mind. I think these gowns have soul. I've seen Celestine's work. It's technically perfect, but cold. These tell stories. They have heart. You can't steal heart. Thank you. No, thank you. For the first time since Adrian proposed, I feel like maybe I can do this. Maybe I can be queen. She touched the constellation gown again. This one. Definitely this one. Though, would it be possible to add something? Of course. What did you have in mind? Adrian and I met at the Royal Observatory. He was there to dedicate a new telescope. I was there as a student. We ended up talking about stars for 3 hours. Could you incorporate the constellation that was directly overhead that night? Lyra, the harp. I smiled, already envisioning how I'd work it into the bodice. I'll make it subtle, something only you and he will recognize. Perfect. She paused. May I ask you something personal? Why did you leave your family? The real reason, not whatever story Celestine is spreading. I considered how much truth to tell. They never saw me. I was useful to them, necessary even, but never seen, never valued. I could have stayed, continued being their ghostwriter, their invisible hands. But I wanted to be real, even if that meant being real alone rather than fake together. Serena nodded slowly. I understand that. Before Adrian, I felt invisible too. Too smart, too strange, too interested in the wrong things. My family loves me, but they never understood me. It's lonely, isn't it? Being surrounded by people who look right through you? The loneliest. But not anymore. I thought about my assistants who'd become friends. About the clients who came to me not for the Moreau name, but for my work. About this moment, speaking honestly with the future queen. Not anymore, I agreed. Over the next 3 months, as I worked on the gowns, events unfolded that I hadn't foreseen. Duke Aldrich left Celestine. The scandal was enormous. Divorce was almost unheard of among the nobility. But apparently, he'd discovered that she'd been taking credit for other people's work for years, not just mine. Several seamstresses from the Moreau atelier had come forward, showing proof that designs attributed to Celestine were actually theirs. Father's business began to fail. Without Celestine's reputation and without my skills, the atelier produced mediocre work that couldn't compete. Mother came to my shop one day, dressed in mourning black, though no one had died. "You've destroyed us," she said without preamble. "Your sister's reputation is ruined. Your father's business is failing. Are you satisfied?" I looked at the woman who had given birth to me but had never been a mother. She was still beautiful, still cold, still unable to see me as anything but a disappointment. "I've destroyed nothing," I said calmly. "I've simply stopped holding you up. If you fall without me, that's not my fault. You owe us. I owe you nothing." The words came out harder than I intended. "I gave you everything for 20 years, my skills, my ideas, my health, my self-worth. You took it all and told me I should be grateful for the opportunity to serve. I'm done being grateful for scraps. You were always jealous of Celestine." "No, Mother. Celestine was always jealous of me. The difference is you chose to see her jealousy as justified and mine as petty. You chose wrong." She left without another word. I never saw her again. 2 weeks before the coronation, disaster struck. I arrived at the shop early one morning to find the front window smashed and the door hanging off its hinges. My heart stopped as I rushed inside, certain I'd find the gowns destroyed. But they were untouched. Instead, something else was missing. All my tools. Every needle, every pair of scissors, every measuring tape and piece of chalk. And painted on the wall in red. "You took everything from me. Now finish the gowns without your precious tools." I didn't need to guess who was responsible. This had Celestine written all over it, dramatic, spiteful, but ultimately short-sighted. She thought I'd have to delay, maybe even forfeit the commission. She didn't know that I'd learned to hide supplies long ago, when she used to destroy my tools in our first life. I had extras hidden in a dozen places around the shop, but I let her think she'd won. I sent word to the palace that there had been a break-in, that I would need a few extra days to ensure the gowns were perfect. The Queen sent royal guards to protect the shop and a note that said simply, "Take all the time you need. Some stars shine brightest under pressure." I used those extra days not to panic, but to add the finishing touches that would make the Constellation gown legendary. Using my hidden tools and working only at night when the guards assured me no one was watching, I incorporated actual stardust into the embroidery. Crushed diamonds so fine they were nearly invisible, but they would catch the light like nothing else could. I added Lyra exactly where Serena had asked, but I also added another constellation, one that would only be visible from certain angles. Corona Borealis, the northern crown. The night before the coronation, I was making the final adjustments when Prince Adrian himself appeared at my shop. The guards let him in without question, though it was nearly midnight. "I wanted to see it," he said simply, "the gown that will transform Lady Serena into Queen Serena." I led him to where it hung, finished and perfect. In the lamplight, the stars seemed to pulse with their own life. "My God," he breathed, "it's like you've captured the night sky itself." That was the idea. She loves stars. She should wear them. He was quiet for a moment, studying the gown with intense focus. "There's Lyra." "You have a good eye, Your Highness. That night at the observatory, it changed my life. I'd been prepared to marry for politics, for alliance, for duty. Then I met a woman who could explain stellar parallax with such passion that I forgot why I was there. He smiled softly. My mother said you would understand what we needed. She was right. Your mother is often right. She is. He turned to me. She also said you've had a difficult path, that your family didn't appreciate your gift. That's one way to put it. Would another way be that they exploited you, abused you, and tried to destroy you when you refused to be their tool anymore? I blinked, surprised by his directness. How did you? We investigated after the break-in. We found patterns. Your sister's designs improved dramatically when you were in the household, declined when you left. The timing of certain innovations that appeared in her work but required skills she demonstrably doesn't possess. Palace intelligence is quite thorough when they choose to be. I see. My mother wants to offer you a position as royal dressmaker. It comes with a title, a generous salary, and a workshop in the palace. It was everything I'd dreamed of in my first life, the recognition and security I'd craved. But now, I'm honored, Your Highness, but I must decline. I've only just learned to stand on my own. I'm not ready to belong to anyone else yet, not even the crown. He smiled. My mother said you'd say that too. The offer stands whenever you're ready. Or, if you're never ready, that's fine too. But know that after tomorrow, you'll never lack for clients. Everyone will want what Evangeline creates. The coronation day dawned clear and cold. Perfect winter weather that would make the constellation gown shimmer like the night sky had descended to earth. I arrived at the palace early to help Serena dress, my hands steady despite the magnitude of the moment. She was nervous, trembling slightly as I helped her into the gown. But as the fabric settled around her, something changed. She stood straighter, her chin lifted, her eyes brightened. The transformation was more than physical, it was alchemical. I feel like a queen, she whispered, staring at her reflection. You are a queen, I corrected, adjusting the train so the stars would cascade perfectly. The gown just makes it visible to everyone else. The coronation itself was a blur of pageantry and ceremony, but I watched from my seat among the minor nobles, a place of honor the queen had insisted on, as Serena walked down the aisle, the constellation gown moving like liquid night around her. There were gasps, then silence, then a collective sigh of wonder. The way the light hit the hidden diamonds made her literally sparkle with each step. The constellations shifted and moved, creating new patterns, telling new stories. And when she knelt for the crown, and the light from the stained glass windows hit her just right, Corona Borealis blazed to life above her head, a crown before the crown. I heard someone behind me whisper, "She's wearing starlight." Someone else responded, "Who created that gown?" "Evangeline, just Evangeline." After the ceremony at the reception, I tried to stay in the background, but people kept finding me. Everyone wanted to know how I'd done it, where I'd learned, when they could commission something. I gave polite non-answers, already overwhelmed by the attention. Then Celestine appeared. She looked terrible, thin, hollow-eyed, dressed in a gown that was clearly her own work and suffered for it. The technical skill was there, but the soul was missing. She'd never had soul without me. "Congratulations," she said, the word bitter in her mouth. "You've won. This isn't a competition, Celestine. It never was. Wasn't it? You took everything from me, my reputation, my husband, my family's business." "I took nothing. I simply stopped giving you what was mine. There's a difference." She stared at me, and for a moment I saw something flicker in her eyes. Not quite remorse, but maybe recognition. "I pushed you down the stairs," she said quietly. "That's what you said that day in your shop. You said you died working for me." I said nothing, letting her draw her own conclusions. "I dream about it sometimes," she continued, pushing someone downstairs. "It feels so real, like a memory, but that's impossible. I would never." "Wouldn't you?" I asked softly. "If I had stayed, if I had continued to refuse to be your ghostwriter, what would you have done? How far would you have gone to keep your secret?" She opened her mouth, then closed it, unable to answer. "Go home, Celestine," I said, not unkindly. "Start over. Learn to create something that's truly yours. It's never too late to become real." She left without another word. I heard later that she'd closed the Moreau atelier, sold the family mansion, and disappeared. Some said she'd gone abroad to study. Others said she'd opened a small shop in another city under a different name. I hoped for her sake it was the latter. There was redemption in starting over, in building something with your own hands. The evening continued, a swirl of congratulations and conversations. The Queen found me on a balcony, escaping the crowd for a moment of quiet. "You've exceeded every expectation," she said, standing beside me to look out over the city lights. "That gown will be remembered for centuries." "That was the idea, Your Majesty." "You still won't accept the position of royal dressmaker?" "Not yet. Maybe not ever. I spent so many years working for others' glory. I need to work for my own a bit longer." She smiled. "I understand. But know that you have a friend in the crown, always. And if you ever need anything—" "Thank you." "No, Evangeline, thank you. You gave my son's wife the confidence to be queen. That gown, those stars, they're armor as much as they are beauty. Every time she doubts herself, she'll remember wearing starlight." As the Queen left, I remained on the balcony, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. In my first life, I died at 25, crushed and broken, believing I was worthless. In this life, I was 23, successful, independent, and very much alive. The stars above formed their ancient patterns: Lyra, Corona Borealis, and dozens of others I'd woven into thread and silk. But there were also new stars being born somewhere out there, invisible to us but burning bright nonetheless. I thought about rebirth, about second chances, about the strange magic that had brought me back to fix what had been broken. I didn't understand it, might never understand it, but I was grateful for it. Tomorrow, I would return to my shop. There would be commissions to fulfill, new designs to create, a business to run. I had my assistants who'd become family, clients who valued my work, a life that was entirely my own. But tonight, I stood under the stars I'd captured in silk and thread, wearing a simple black dress with silver at the cuffs, being exactly who I was, Evangeline. Just Evangeline. It was enough. It was everything. The months following the coronation were a whirlwind. My shop was flooded with commissions from every noble house in the kingdom and beyond. Foreign dignitaries who'd attended the ceremony sent requests from their own countries. I had to expand again, hiring more seamstresses, opening a second workshop. But success brought its own challenges. Other dressmakers, jealous of my sudden rise, spread rumors that I'd used witchcraft to create the constellation gown. Some claimed I'd made a deal with dark forces, trading my soul for talent. I might have found it amusing if it hadn't started affecting my assistants. One had stones thrown at her while walking to work. Queen Serena heard about the harassment and responded in a way no one expected. She held a public audience where she wore the constellation gown again, then invited me to the front of the throne room. "There have been questions," she said, her voice carrying to every corner, "about how this gown was created. Some say magic. Some say deals with darkness. I say it was created with something far more powerful: skill, innovation, and years of dedication to a craft. Evangeline, would you please explain your technique to the court?" It was a command phrased as a request. I stepped forward and, in clear terms that anyone could understand, explained the silver wire weaving, the crushed diamond dust, the mathematical precision required to make the constellations appear correctly. I brought out samples, showed the materials, demonstrated the stitching technique. No magic, I concluded, just thread, needle, and 20 years of practice. The Queen smiled. "And that, my lords and ladies, is the truth of it. Talent isn't magic. It's work. Let no one speak otherwise." The rumors died after that, replaced by even more demand for my work. But I was careful not to lose myself in the success. I remembered what had happened in my first life when Celestine had become consumed by the need to maintain her reputation. I took only the commissions that inspired me, recommended other talented dressmakers when I couldn't accommodate someone, and made sure my assistants were well paid and credited for their contributions. One day, about a year after the coronation, my assistant Marie came to me with an unusual request. "There's a girl here," she said. "She says she's looking for work. She's skilled. I tested her with some basic stitching, and she's excellent, but—" Marie hesitated. She won't give her name. She says she needs to speak with you first. Curious, I went to the front of the shop. A young woman stood there, perhaps 19, wearing a traveling cloak with the hood pulled up. When she lowered it, I gasped. She looked exactly like Celestine had at that age, but softer somehow, less sharp. It took me a moment to place her. Celestine's daughter, born just before I died in my first life. But that was impossible. In this timeline, Celestine had only recently married Duke Aldrich, hadn't had children yet. You don't know me, the girl said quickly, but I know you. My name is Eleanor. Eleanor Moreau. I'm your cousin. From your father's brother's side. The one who moved to the eastern provinces. I studied her carefully. Father didn't have a brother, but this girl looked so much like our family, and there was something in her eyes, a desperate hope mixed with fear that I recognized too well. Why don't we talk in private? I suggested, leading her to my office. Once the door was closed, Eleanor's composure crumbled. I'm Celestine's daughter, she admitted. She had me when she was 17, before her marriage. Father paid to have me raised quietly in the country. I was told my mother died in childbirth. But last month, the woman I thought was my mother, my nurse, she was dying and she told me the truth. I sat down heavily. Celestine had a daughter, a secret daughter she'd abandoned. The hypocrisy of it, all those years of playing the perfect daughter while hiding this. Why come to me? I asked. Why not go to her? Eleanor laughed bitterly. I did. She took one look at me and had me thrown out. Said I was a lying opportunist trying to take advantage of her troubles. But you? The nurse said you were different. That you were kind. That you might help me even though you have every reason not to. What kind of help do you need? I can sew. I'm good at it. I had to be to support myself after the people raising me died. But no one will hire me without references. I thought maybe... She trailed off, hope dimming in her eyes. I'm sorry, this was foolish. You don't owe me anything. I thought about cycles, about patterns repeating through generations. Here was another girl abandoned by the Moreau family, another pair of skilled hands dismissed as worthless. But this time, I could change the pattern. Can you start tomorrow? I asked. Her eyes widened. You'll hire me? On a trial basis, 3 months. If you work well, you stay. If not, I'll write you a recommendation for another shop. Fair? More than fair, thank you. Thank you so much. Eleanor turned out to be brilliantly talented, with an eye for color that surpassed even mine. She had Celestine's technical precision, but combined it with genuine creativity. Within 6 months, she was leading her own projects. Within a year, clients were specifically requesting her work. I never told her about my rebirth, about the first life where her mother had killed me. But I taught her everything I knew, gave her the mentorship and recognition Celestine had denied me. Watching her bloom into her own artist was one of the most satisfying things I'd ever experienced. 2 years passed, my shop became a full atelier, though I kept the original tiny space as a private workshop where I went to think and create. The Constellation gown had become legendary, copied endlessly but never successfully replicated. Queen Serena commissioned more gowns from me, each one telling a different story, each one giving her strength for different occasions. Then, one winter evening, a familiar figure appeared in my private workshop. I'd been working late, alone, when the bell chimed. I looked up to see Celestine, standing in the doorway. She was much changed, thinner, older-looking, though she was only 3 years my senior, dressed simply in dark wool. But there was something different in her eyes, a clarity that hadn't been there before. "May I come in?" she asked. I nodded, setting down my needle. She entered slowly, looking around the small space. "This is where it all started." "Yes. I've been traveling," she said. "Learning, actually learning, not just taking credit. I went to the Eastern Kingdoms, studied their techniques, then south to understand their dye methods. I can actually create now, not at your level, but honestly." "That's good." She pulled something from her bag, a small piece of fabric, embroidered with a pattern I recognized. It was the design I'd been working on the night I died, the one she'd taken from my hands as I lay bleeding. "I found this in my things when I was packing to leave," she said. "I don't remember keeping it, but there it was." When I touched it, I had the strangest feeling, like a memory that wasn't quite mine, of falling, of pain, of regret so deep it felt like drowning. I said nothing, watching her carefully. I know it sounds insane, she continued, but I keep having dreams. Dreams where I push you down the stairs. Dreams where you die. And when I wake up, I know with absolute certainty that in some other version of our lives, that's exactly what happened. Dreams can feel very real, I said neutrally. This isn't just dreams. She met my eyes directly. Somehow, I know I killed you. Maybe not in this life, but in another one. And you came back. You came back, and instead of destroying me immediately, which you could have done, you let me destroy myself. Then you gave me the chance to start over. The workshop was silent except for the distant sound of winter wind. I don't expect forgiveness, Celestine said. I don't deserve it. But I needed you to know that I know, and that I'm sorry. Not just for this life, but for all of it. Every cruelty, every theft, every moment I tried to dim your light because I couldn't bear how bright it was. Eleanor is your daughter, I said, the words coming out without planning. She flinched. I know. I see her sometimes from a distance. She's brilliant. You've taught her well. She deserves to know her mother. The mother who abandoned her? Who denied her? No. She deserves better. She has better with you. Celestine stood to leave, then paused. I'm opening a small shop in the eastern provinces. Very small, nothing like what we had. I'll be teaching young girls from poor families, girls who have talent but no opportunities. It's not redemption, but maybe it's a start. Maybe it is. She left, and I never saw her again. But years later, I heard about a school for seamstresses in the eastern provinces, one that accepted students for free, taught them not just technique, but artistry, and sent them into the world prepared to create their own destinies. The founder was known only as the teacher, but I knew who it was. Eleanor eventually opened her own shop, became successful in her own right. She never knew Celestine was her mother. That secret died with Celestine and me. But she became the artist Celestine could have been if jealousy hadn't poisoned her, the woman I might have been if I'd had support from the beginning. Time moved forward as it always does. I created gowns for princesses and merchants' daughters alike. I watched Queen Serena grow into her role, wearing my designs like armor and wings combined. I saw Prince Adrian become King Adrian, wise and kind. The constellation gown displayed in the Royal Museum as a testament to the power of transformation. 5 years after the coronation, on the anniversary of my death in that first life, I stood in my original workshop, now a quiet retreat from the bustle of my main atelier. I was 30, successful beyond my wildest dreams, surrounded by people who valued me for exactly who I was. A young girl appeared in the doorway, one of my newest apprentices, nervous and eager. Miss Evangeline, there's a client asking for you specifically. She says she needs a gown that will change her life. I smiled, remembering another girl who'd believed a gown could change everything, who'd died believing she was worthless, who'd been reborn to discover her own worth. Send her in, I said. Let's see what kind of transformation she needs. As the apprentice left, I touched the constellation pattern I'd embroidered on my own sleeve, a private reminder of how far I'd come. In my first life, I'd died at 25, broken and alone. In this life, I'd built an empire of thread and dreams. The client entered, a young woman with nervous hands and hopeful eyes, clutching a small purse that probably held her life savings. She reminded me of myself, both who I'd been and who I'd become. Tell me, I said, gesturing for her to sit. What story do you want your gown to tell? As she began to speak, haltingly at first, then with growing passion, I listened with the attention I'd always craved but never received. Because every woman deserved to have her story heard, her dreams made tangible, her worth recognized. That was the real magic, not rebirth, not revenge, not even success. It was the ability to see someone clearly and show them their own light. I'd learned to do it with thread and needle, with silk and starlight, one gown at a time. The stars were constant, whether woven into fabric or shining in the sky. They'd witnessed my first death, my second birth, and everything that came between. Now they watched as I began sketching a new design for a new client in a new chapter of a life I'd claimed as entirely my own. Outside, snow began to fall, each flake unique and perfect, temporary but beautiful. Like lives, like chances, like the moments when we choose to transform suffering into art. I picked up my needle, threaded it with silver, and began to create something extraordinary. Because that's what I did now. I took the ordinary and made it magical. Took the overlooked and made it seen. Took the broken and made it whole. Just Evangeline. It was more than enough. It was everything.